A recent poll of Americans found that 71% of us believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. Even accounting for biased polling, and I'm sure that it was, and leading questions, and I'm sure that they were, that is a startling enough statistic that it has the potential to lead a lot of us into that frame of mind where we are doom scrolling through our preferred social media, wondering how we will ever be able to right the ship. Regardless of political affiliation, there are clear enough signs of entropy and decay that clear-thinking people from all sides can say, this isn't necessarily where we want to be. Clear-thinking Christians, including me then, can be forgiven for gingerly looking skyward from time to time, waiting for the doom comets that will herald some sort of judgment from on high, and I would be surprised if I was alone in my prayers, wondering how long God will allow this to last. If you live on the internet, you have most likely heard the expression black-pilled. So what would it take? How long will the Most High withhold his anger? Genesis chapter 18, verse 1. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. So what I want to tell is a story, a parable. But Sodom and Gomorrah has all the hallmarks of a Michael Bay blockbuster. If that were the case, this would be the cutscene between the opening credits. Abraham sitting in his tent when a couple of strangers walk by. For those of you well-versed in your Old Testament lore, you will recognize this as the meeting between Abraham and God that is best known for the predictions God makes about Abraham's future children. And Sarah, Abraham's wife, who is eavesdropping and laughing, is chastened for her unbelief. But something else happens during that meeting, or rather, happens when Abraham escorts the three men on their continued journey. In verse 16, when the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Abraham meets these three men, one of whom is referred to as the Lord, and as the four of them are walking, the Lord consults with the other two, considering how much he should divulge about his future plans to Abraham. In the end, he decides it is important that Abraham know what God is planning. In verse 20, so then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sins so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?" The Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Then Abraham spoke up again. "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5 people? If I find 45 there," he said, "I will not destroy it." Once again he spoke to him. "What if only 40 are found there?" He said, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there?" He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Abraham said, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there?" He said, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there?" He answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." When the Lord had finished speaking to Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. Most of us have been to a yard sale, or an auction, or a flea market. We know what Abraham is doing. We've played that game before. I doubt most of us would be able to do as well as Abraham, but most of us know how to sweet talk a couple bucks off of whatever it is we are buying. But this isn't local sports memorabilia, or hot pads, or Barbies, or whatever your particular Achilles heel is when it comes to the garbage you don't need and have no business buying. These are the lives of an entire nation. I am amazed also at Abraham's response. It's not exactly like he and the rulers of Sodom are friends. The kings of Sodom were part of a regional rebellion that led to the capture of Abraham's nephew. When Abraham returned with his nephew Lot and all the possessions of Sodom, his words with the king of Sodom were, to put it mildly, cold. He disapproved of Sodom and its neighbor Gomorrah. They were wicked. He knew that. And perhaps he begged for mercy on their behalf only for his nephew who was still living in Sodom. But I believe that Abraham knew what the cost of God's judgment would be, and he pled with God to stay his hand. I don't know why we as Christians, after being given the gift of salvation, have a harder time with this than some of the Old Testament prophets. Maybe we are less familiar with what God's judgment looks like. Maybe we are naive to what the wrath of God actually means. But Abraham offers a stark challenge to those of us who would wish to see God punish the evil among us. Flash forward to the main event. Genesis 19. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way early in the morning." He insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had all gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so we can have sex with them." So I have a lot of things to say about this story and about Lot, but I can tell you this particular part isn't on the menu. If you care to read the story about the confrontation between Lot and the men of Sodom, feel free. If you have questions you would like to ask me, I'm available to answer to the best of my ability. But as strange as it may seem in a story about Sodom and Gomorrah, matters of sexuality are not what brings us here this morning. This much is clear. The men of Sodom wished evil upon the strangers who entered their city, and Lot stood in the gap. I've thought a lot about Lot this week. I don't understand him. As a kid, I heard that this story is a lesson to what happens if you flirt with evil. Lot lived surrounded by wickedness. It seems he chose that lifestyle, first because the pastures surrounding Sodom were more fertile than the desert where Abraham chose to live. But somehow, somewhere along the way, he ended up living in the city. The analogy was always that this is how sin, particularly sins involving greed and prosperity, can lure you in. But like so many of the stories I like to preach about, I saw something different when I read this story as an adult. And Lot was sitting at the gate. Now, there is always a risk when preaching or writing a sermon, when one wishes to be clever, in taking a small part of one sentence and inflating it beyond its meaning in order to make much of something that is small. And I'm going to try not to do that this morning. But imagine that you live in Sodom or Chicago. You know the city is dangerous. You know there is evil. And one would assume that you, as a citizen, have found a way to avoid it. Why, then, would you be sitting by the gate late at evening? I don't think it's happenstance. I don't think it's an accident. And I don't think that Lot is just chock full of southern hospitality. I think Lot had a mission. I think Lot sat at the gates of hell and snatched the innocent from the jaws of evil. I think it was on purpose. I don't think he was on his way home from poker night and just so happened to see two tired travelers and offered them a cold one and a cot. I think Lot put himself in such a place so that he could protect the ignorant from the worst predations of his city. Why he was living there, I don't know. Maybe he shouldn't have been. But of two things I am fairly certain. One, there were not 10 righteous men in Sodom. And two, Lot was a righteous man. So what are the takeaways? Unlike Michael Bay movies, is there a point beyond the action and the explosions? We know how Sodom and Gomorrah turned out. And the story of Lot doesn't end with a happily ever after from there. In fact, Lot becomes the father of the Moabites and the Ammonites, who both war with the people of Israel on many, many occasions. But in reading this, I was comforted with 3 thoughts. First, if you're like me, occasionally you will read a headline and wonder if this is the beginning of the judgment of God for America. If you, like me, steal glances in the sky waiting for fireballs or lightning strikes or meteors. If you also wonder what our calling is in the midst of what appears to be so much evil, take up your courage. There are enough of us in this room to save America, or at least Springs. I truly believe that. For the sake of the few, God would have spared the whole city. 2, our calling is clear. We stand at the gates and we save the innocent. That will look vastly different for each of us, but I pray that we support each other as we find a way to stand in the gap for those that need us. 3, God will not abandon us to the judgments he has prepared for the wicked. The story of salvation is the story of us claiming a grace we do not deserve. As ominous as the clouds may look, he will not forget us. I hope this has been challenging. I hope it has been comforting. I hope that if there is anything I've said that made you feel uncomfortable, you'll feel free to come and talk to me or Jeremy or Adam. We spend an awful lot of time talking about you guys, hoping and praying you are doing all right. If we can help you in your personal ministries in any way, come and talk to us. We might not be able to solve anything, but we can at least listen and pray with you guys. Thanks.